Hey, if you have a moment, check out our online store at AnimeUproar.com. We have exclusive designs created by pro manga artist Kuzomari, including Escanor, Praise the Sun, Meliodas, Feel the Wrath, and for a limited time, Ultra Instinct Shaggy one-shotting Thanos. Because yes, that's a thing. All the proceeds directly support more content on this channel, so check it out, link in the description. What is up everybody, it's Animac here for AnimeUproar, and in this video I will be talking about possibly my all-time favorite 7 Deadly Sins character, Bon the Bandit, aka Undead Bon, aka Fairy King Bon, aka the Fox's Sin of Greed. Yes, he has a lot of names, and as much as I love Meliodas, Escanor, and Mael, my other favorite 7 Deadly Sins characters, there will always be a special place in my heart for Bon. But why do I and so many others love Bon? When he is first introduced, Bon is portrayed as a depressed masochist whose favorite pastimes are apparently fighting, stealing, and getting drunk. Not exactly the profile of a battle shonen hero, and at first Bon appears to be more of an anti-hero, especially when King accuses him of killing his sister Elaine and destroying the Fairy King's forest just so he could drink from the Fountain of Youth and obtain immortality. And we can't really blame King for thinking this, since that is the exact crime that Bon was charged with. This was his sin, and he spent years in prison because of it. He was even sentenced to death, but he couldn't be executed because he was immortal, so he just spent his time getting tortured in dungeons. And the crazy thing about all of this is that Bon doesn't even try to defend himself from these accusations or to escape from prison, which is especially interesting when we learn that Bon did not do what he is being accused of. On the contrary, he tried to save the Fairy King's forest from a red demon, and not only did he not kill Elaine, he loved Elaine. And although he did his best to save her, in the end she sacrificed her own life to save him. So Bon lost the woman he loved, and not only that, but she died in his arms. And to make things worse, Bon always felt horribly guilty and responsible for Elaine's death. While fighting the Red Demon, Bon didn't realize that demons had more than one heart, and that mistake led to Elaine's death because she sacrificed her own life to save him. Bon is so distraught and depressed by this traumatic event that he just doesn't care about anything anymore. He is immortal, so he cannot die no matter how much damage is inflicted upon him, which means that he is cursed to live forever with crippling guilt over what happened to Elaine. He allows himself to be arrested and he makes no effort to defend himself because nothing matters to him anymore. Depressed and heartbroken, Bon no longer has a purpose in life, and because he blames himself for what happened to Elaine, he probably feels that he deserves to be punished. He probably thinks that he deserves to be locked away and brutally tortured because he got to live and become immortal while the woman he loved lost her life to save him. Bon has survivor's guilt. He feels that his life is meaningless, and the only thing that is able to grab his interest even slightly is Meliodas. When the captain of the 7 Deadly Sins comes to recruit Bon, Bon has no interest whatsoever. But when he realizes how strong Meliodas is and that if he joins he will have the opportunity to test his strength against Meliodas, Bon decides to join the 7 Deadly Sins. However, the Bon that we see at this time is not the real Bon. He hides his deep sadness and despair from his comrades, and he presents himself as just an eccentric guy who loves fighting strong opponents and getting very, very drunk. Without knowing his full backstory, we might mistake Bon for a carefree and immature young guy who only cares about having a good time and living by his own rules. But in reality, Bon's heavy drinking and careless attitude is an attempt to numb his despair and heartbreak. And his need to keep testing his strength by facing stronger and stronger opponents most likely stems from his resentment over the fact that he is immortal and cannot die. So he is cursed to live forever without Elaine and with the terrible guilt he feels over her death. In reality, Bon keeps trying to challenge Meliodas and other strong fighters because he is probably hoping that he will eventually find someone who can actually kill him and save him from his despair. And even knowing this much, we can see that Bon is an interesting and multi-dimensional character. He seems like a fun-loving guy who enjoys being reckless, getting drunk, fighting, and in general having a good time. On the surface, Bon is basically the party girl of the 7 Deadly Sins. but beneath the surface he is an emotional and psychological mess, and this comes into play perfectly when Bond decides to kill Meliodas because he was falsely promised by a goddess that Elaine will be revived if Meliodas dies. Bond knows that Meliodas saved him when he recruited him into the Seven Deadly Sins and gave him some sort of purpose in life after years of utter depression and despair. Meliodas is Bond's best friend, and Bond admits that aside from Elaine, Meliodas is the only other person who truly understands him. And yet, Bond is so haunted by guilt over what happened to Elaine that he decides that killing Meliodas, his best friend, is a price that he is willing to pay in order to bring Elaine back. Thankfully, Bond fails to kill Meliodas, and as he realizes the truth behind Meliodas' relationship to Elizabeth and the curse that has been placed on both of them by the Demon King and the Supreme Deity, Bond is racked with guilt yet again. This time over the fact that he betrayed Meliodas and tried to kill him. For all these years, Bond has been so depressed and heartbroken because the woman he loved died in his arms. But he later learns that Meliodas had to go through this very same experience with Elizabeth, not once, not twice, but over 100 times. Bond feels terrible about his own weakness and his willingness to betray his best friend just so he could spare himself the emotional torture of losing Elaine. But Meliodas understands how he feels. Meliodas has lived through that same hell, and he forgives Bond right away. It takes some time before Bond can overcome his sense of guilt, but he eventually does. He develops and grows as a character, and he eventually comes full circle. Now, there will be some minor manga spoilers at this point, so just giving you a quick heads up right now. After Elaine is revived by Melascula's magic, Bond actually decides to leave her and enter purgatory in order to save Meliodas' emotions from the Demon King. Bond goes from trying to kill his best friend in order to revive Elaine, to leaving Elaine and his other friends and entering the notoriously treacherous realm of purgatory, knowing full well that he may never see Elaine or his other friends again. Bond is so committed to helping his friend and making things right after betraying him in the past, and this to me is truly amazing character development, but we're not done yet. Eventually we'll learn about Bond's backstory and how he grew up. He was a poor boy who had to steal just to survive, and he was brutally mistreated by society. He was beaten, abused, and he was almost sold into slavery to a sick maniac nobleman. Thankfully, Bond met Zhivago, a werefox who saved him from the human traffickers and in general taught him how to survive and treated him as his own son. Because he was a werefox, Zhivago had to assume human form to avoid being brutally murdered because the humans considered all beastmen, including werefoxes, to be dangerous monsters. In fact, Zhivago's biological son was eventually hunted down and murdered by humans even though he was just a boy. And as a result of this incident, Bond lost touch with Zhivago and he basically lost his only real mentor and parental figure until he finally meets him again much later in life. Bond's backstory is truly heartbreaking, and I am not ashamed to say that I shed a tear or 10 when I read it in the manga and then again when I saw it animated in season 2 of the anime. After everything he went through, after being beaten, abused, and faced with mistreatment and discrimination on a daily basis, we might expect Bond to become a harsh and cold person. We might expect him to never trust anyone and to be willing to do whatever it takes to survive, without regard to whether his actions are good or evil. After all, if he was mistreated all his life, why should he treat anyone else with respect and compassion? Why shouldn't he just become a brooding, jaded man who is angry at the world and everyone around him? But Bond doesn't become angry and jaded. We see this when he first meets Elaine. Even though as a bandit he has a reputation for being greedy, in reality he isn't, and he gives up his quest for the Fountain of Youth after he meets Elaine, because he fell in love with Elaine and he decided that being with her is much more important than immortality. When he loses Elaine, Bond does experience heavy psychological and emotional torture. He is tempted again to give up on life and to become angry and jaded. And perhaps he does for a time, but eventually we see his true self emerge once again as he becomes one of the 7 deadly sins, as he makes friends with Meliodas and the others, and as he struggles to overcome the loss of Elaine. Even before Elaine is revived, we can see the growth in Bond's character by how he treats the people around him, including Meliodas, Hawk, and Jericho, but also King, Elizabeth, Deanne, and so on. Even though he is haunted by his tragic past, and even though he feels terrible guilt and despair, Ban still treats others with compassion. He still jokes with them, drinks with them, competes with them, and laughs with them. Despite everything he went through, Ban is still a fundamentally good, kind, and compassionate person. And as the story goes on, this becomes more and more evident. I don't want to spoil too much for those of you who haven't read the manga, although the manga is amazing and I definitely recommend checking it out. But Ban eventually develops a technique that is able to give energy to other people rather than merely steal the energy of others. And of course, stealing objects and even the power of other individuals was the Fox's Sin of Greed's original special ability. But as he learns this new technique that gives rather than taking away, the development of Ban's physical power mirrors his development as a character. I think that the 7 Deadly Sins story handles Ban's development perfectly, and he is truly a multi-dimensional and nuanced character that I cannot help but love. He starts off as an eccentric and mysterious anti-hero with a dark past, but he becomes a full-fledged hero, a dedicated lover, a faithful friend, and an all-around great person. He might have a reputation for being a greedy, drunken masochist, and there is some truth to these claims, but Ban is so much more than that. He is a fictional character in a fantasy shonen anime/manga, but he feels like a real person because his character is so well written and so thoroughly developed. And let's face it, he also has an amazing and utterly badass character design, but that's not quite as important. All in all, Ban, this greedy, drunken masochist, is one of my favorite anime characters of all time. He feels like a complete, complex, and relatable individual, someone we would all love to have a beer with. But at the same time, I wouldn't be afraid to shed a tear over his heartbreaking past and his unbreakable determination to keep moving forward. And that is why we all love Ban. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, you can leave a like to let me know. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And finally, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who has been supporting AnimeUproar on Patreon, both now and in the past. If you want to support more content on this channel, feel free to check out our Patreon page, link in the description. Let me know what you guys think about Ban down in the comments. Is he your favorite 7 Deadly Sins character, or do you prefer someone else? And feel free to hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at AnimeUproar if you have any requests for future videos. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.